Welcome to the Nehemiah Entrepreneurship Community Podcast. I am your host, Patrice Tsague. I'm here with the co-MC of Nehemiah Week. We are at day two. Susan, we almost there, halfway done.
Yeah, it's pretty
At
exciting.
least with you.
High
Yeah.
energy day with a lot of power packed in it.
Well, so today was what we call day one of the conference, was day two. So we have a 2-day conference, Tuesday and Wednesday. So this morning we begin with, of course, by the way, guys, if you attend the Nehemiah Week, I want to encourage you, before we begin every morning, we start with a 20-minute time of prayer. I want to encourage you to join that moment, right? That moment we all get together in prayer right before the event. So plug in prayer. By the way, that's also a moment, I think it's a free, I don't know, but anyway, join that moment. But then, I, but then the first, I think, hour or so, the worship and devotion is free. So if you're watching and listening to us right now, you're not yet registered, go sign up because you can be a part of. Actually, no, you can't. Sorry, it's on Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah.
Actually,
And
that's
yeah,
right. It's
LinkedIn
free.
as well. Facebook,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and YouTube.
LinkedIn and YouTube is free. So mark your calendar. At that time, I think is 6:30 Pacific and 9:30 Eastern Standard, wherever you are around the world. It is no cost to you. The devotion, the worship time, and the devotional. Today's worship, Susan from Paris, Miami, Lamande. What was your
Yeah,
thoughts?
powerful. And interestingly enough, they did it in three languages. It was in English, French, and what language was it in Africa?
Not Swahili, but anyway, the language of Congo. I think
The
they call it
Congo.
Victor. What do they call it?
Yeah.
Our producer will tell us in a minute. Yeah, the Congolese. Lingala. It's
Congo.
they say that's the language of heaven. It's such a melodic language.
Yeah.
It's very melodic. Melodic, is that the
That's why
word?
interesting to hear worship songs that you know in your own language sung in all these other languages, and it's just very powerful way to start the day and set up for the day, which obviously was the next thing was Pastor Moore, who
Wow.
made
Be
it
your
very
best.
clear that we have that our call is very powerful, that when we're called to the marketplace, we are called to start with no matter what we have. I thought that was his point, which was interesting, was, you know, we say in the United States, we say we're all created equal, but we know we're not created the same. We're not created the same. And it's the unique gifts that we have that really are what we're being called to use in the marketplace. And I thought that was very, succinct way to think about what we're trying to do here. Use our
This
unique.
this idea of call to the marketplace that we tied to his message reemphasizes this idea that if we're going to do it, right, and if we do it in his name, we ought to do it with a level of urgency around excellence, right? And I know that it creates this human pressure of that can lead to performance,
Mhm.
but that's not the idea at all. The idea is that give it your best. Susan, it reminds me of, you think about our parents and grandparents, this idea that your clothes doesn't have to be the best clothes, but it at least should be iron, right?
Right.
At least should be clean.
Yeah.
That essentially, so it's not about having the latest and greatest uh, uh trademark, whether it's Nike, Jordan, whatever, but it's about being your best. It brings this idea that whatever I do, I'd approach you with my whole heart, with the devotion. I played basketball in college, and the coach, I'm not college, high school, the coach of of my of my my high school varsity team brought the varsity team to watch me play. I was a junior, and he said, that young man plays with his whole heart.
And that's
That
all.
was his whole premise. He said, I want you to pray with that kind of heart.
Mhm.
That's the idea. What are you doing? Put your all in it. And I assure you this, as you put your all in it, God will bless it.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because he was talking about just this idea of take your best, whatever that is, and then add to it imagination, motivation, and aspiration. And
Amen.
it was quite powerful. And the cool thing is it's all recorded and everyone can go back to
That's
it because
right.
it's recording on our site in the free site. Very cool.
Jaguar Rodriguez is watching us. Jaguar, tell us where you're from, what country you're from. He's wrote in French. He's probably from Europe or Africa. He says in French, Dieu te bénisse et ton émission spéculaire va de l'avant. He said, God blesses you and may your amazing program go in advance. Right?
Okay, that's great.
So
Thank you.
our
Thank
producer tell me that it's my cousin, actually. He's from South Africa. I didn't recognize his name.
you.
Well, Cuckoo, how are you? Thanks for watching. So and then I had a tough task of taking over after Pastor Moore. And really the simplicity of my message was around this idea that how do we know we're called? And if we are called, how do we identify the call? Right? This idea of, recognizing the Holy Spirit help us to bring clarity to what the call, know our gifts and skills, the burdens that's within us, our passion. And what I didn't get to today, which I'll get to on Thursday, this idea of how do we engineer it intentionally with the Great Commission and the Great Commandment in mind, right? To love your neighbor as yourself, the greatest commandment.
Well, and I appreciated you sort of laid the groundwork, and there started to be this theme throughout the day, that you sort of laid out there, that had a lot to do with this idea of obedience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think that word, and the other thing I love was you said we need to engage, right? This idea we need to engage and not be passive. It's a very powerful point that we need
Because
to.
part of the challenge, I mean, think of marketplace. I mean, it's just a lot of mess out there. And it's so easy for us. And we don't want to get our hands dirty, nor do we want to offend anybody. We don't want, right? Like I don't engage. I was telling somebody, I don't really engage in Facebook personally on my political position,
Mhm.
right?
You engage
But
people, you engage
I
conversation
engage people, conversation. So
from
it's not,
value and service too.
oh yeah, 100%. Because part of engagement, don't be afraid to go into engage people. You don't have to engage them in what they're doing, but you engage them in what you're called to do.
Mhm.
And what you'll find, Susan, is that they're not often what they project,
Mhm.
right? Because they're reacting to the mess. But when you engage them in ignoring all that, you see the human.
Yeah.
Right? You see the human, and that's an opportunity for eternal engagement, which is what we're all about.
Yep. And then,
And then,
well,
of
thank you for laying that. And then we went to Andy Mason, our Kiwi from New Zealand, who now lives in the United States, who was really spent his whole career in this subject of, having God work with you in the workplace. It was just very cool. A lot of these people today had spent their entire career in this intersection point of faith and work, which I thought was powerful. And his one I thought was interesting when you say, how would you know it's a calling? I thought it was interesting that you talked about, are you good at it? Do you get energy from it? And can it create funding? Right? In other words, can you sustain yourself in some way financially? And that's an interesting part, the intersections of those ideas. And you'd mentioned some of that too, about how do you know that it's
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and that point is very valid because ultimately, if we're talking about marketplace ministry, what's different about marketplace and or workplace is that this idea of economic engine,
Mhm.
right? Which traditionally we think of ministry, that's not as important. Though it should be, but that has been an emphasis. But you cannot talk marketplace and workplace without addressing economic engine,
Right.
right? And because in doing it that way in itself is a ministry in that space,
Mhm.
demonstrating the difference as to how we do it in a way that's redemptive, graceful, and eternal.
And serving, yeah.
And serving. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Which, by the way, we're going to get into a lot of that tomorrow. I can't wait till tomorrow. And then,
Mhm.
of course, Shea Bine, she brought. Now, here's what I love most about what she said, because what Shea did is what Shea kind of really always does, which is I had made the comment about this idea that grace needs us, right? Which doesn't in its face sound theological, because grace is it's sufficient unto itself, but without us it can't do the work. So Shay now kind of takes it, and she brings this idea with grace. There's a sense of calm and rest and rhythm of the Holy Spirit, a sense of trusting, a sense of working without wearing ourselves out.
Now, she talked about creating intentional spaces, leaving space for partnership with God. And one real practical thing she talked about was don't have back-to-back meetings where you don't have at least a moment to just say, God, be with me in this frustration or in this, decision or whatever. I just thought it was very practical use of calling yourself to have peace in your life as well, as well as taking on the world, right? And I thought that was eye-opening. Good reminder.
It's entrepreneurs, a simple tool for that is like if somebody else does your calendar, 15 to 30 minutes minimum in between meetings. At least practically it minimize your bumping into stuff, right? But I think what I've been suggesting even longer,
Yeah.
to allow not just for this transition, but for a moment of reflection and
Right.
contemplation. Then Serene. Now, Serene is always she's always deep, right? She's always kind of brings the Greeks, the Hebrews, and whatever other language, the Latin. But this idea of the power of prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was kind of wondering where she was going.
I did.
But then
First, I just said that to somebody. I said, we got on there, and she, as you said later, we're like a university. We're going off in this whole power of prophecy. I thought, how does this have to do with workplace calling? But what was interesting was she talked about at the end of the day, two things really hit me was one, when you're called to a royal priesthood, she looked up, what is a royal priesthood all about? Well, it's all about declaring something, declaring something, declaring, prophecy, but declaring something over your business, which speaks to the idea of your tongue. And when you use your mouth to create positive momentum, it's not just for you and your business and your revenue. I thought she said very powerfully, it's for your clients and your employees and your suppliers and everyone you're working with, that you're empowered by having this sense of energy of declaring good, which is God's good, that they've been entrusted into your care. Anyway, that was incredibly powerful. I had people call me afterwards saying, "Did you hear that?" So it was really quite impressive.
No, it was, and she's amazing. And then of course we had Oz, who gave us the history of workplace marketing industry, which was incredibly powerful, guys. For nothing else, this was worth the price of gold. And then we had this panel.
Yeah, just a minute. So Oz Hillman, who really was at the foreground of putting together this idea. I had no idea how long, since the 30s, there has been this effort to be on record as saying God shows up in the workplace too, right? And so what was amazing was over the course of all these years, it's evolved and evolved. And there's almost like a moment right now whereas in the past it was very islandy, they didn't really know each other, and now they're working together. And now it's the sense of a movement that says you might think you're alone in trying to bring your faith to the marketplace, but there's actually a lot of support, which was very exciting. And it led to this panel, which was really good. Thank you for setting that panel up. Very insightful.
We've always at Nehemiah, we see ourselves as almost a facilitator, right, of ideas and concepts around this space, because that's how we serve our members, right? We have over 2,000 members in our community, and I think to a certain extent they look to us. Oftentimes people say, Patrice, don't you see it? Aren't you competing against these guys? Yeah, I mean that's true, but no. In that, our members pay a monthly membership due so that we can in a sense curate content and information for them. They don't just want what I say or what you say, Susan. They want to know, they want to trust this marketplace, this community called Nehemiah, as being a marketplace where we let them decide.
Yeah.
We trust them enough.
What's amazing is so you look at Michael Pink, who obviously he came at it from a workplace environment where he's applying biblical principles to selling. Okay.
That's right.
And then you look
That's
at James Lockett, who's an international lawyer in big
right.
companies, global companies all over the world. And he starts working on this idea of the International Christian Chamber. And then you have Chris Harrington, who was insurance and working in business. And then he started this idea of marketplace chaplains, of people in companies that could be safe places to come to talk about the spiritual issues. I mean, very different angles on this. And yet, so there's not like what's exciting about this conversation that we're facilitating in the industry is you don't have to like do one way or the other. There's a lot of different ways to bring your best, as Pastor Moore said, to bring your best to others in your work and bring value. And it doesn't, sometimes it's really direct, and sometimes it's really, subtle, where they just see you living out your faith and having an integrity. And sometimes, as Chris Harrington said, sometimes you end up giving people the opportunity to, he says, I'll listen to you. I'll share what I've learned. And if you'd like, I'll share what my faith teaches.
That's right.
And it's just a very comfortable approach to being present with others who might come from all different places and backgrounds and interests.
Absolutely. The expression of marketplace, the calling in marketplace, has as broad and variety of expression as the people group around the world.
Right.
Right. And the personality gifting around the world. And all expression, if it's done in his name for his purposes, is not only good, but desirable. Tomorrow is going to be other expression. So Pastor Noella is going to kick us off right from Paris. And then Susan, you're going to talk about, so in 30 seconds or less, what can we expect from you tomorrow?
So I'm going to pull the thread on the idea that this marketplace thing, this idea of being called to the marketplace, is a journey. And you know what? Every journey has a risk. And so we're going to talk about, hopefully honestly, what are the risks of stepping out with your faith into a calling? What risk doesn't always mean negatives. Risk means risk of opportunity. There's these big opportunities I've got to seize. And sometimes God's vision for you is bigger than yours. And then there's also the risk of losing or embarrassment. And so we're going to talk about this opportunity to, understand risk and understand it from the point of view. 4 things you can do today to address
I love it. And nobody does it better than you. And then Robert Foucault is going to come up behind you, and he's going to share his own journey, how he navigated through some of that as he walked out from corporate into marketplace, right? And then that's laid the groundwork for Nick. Nick,
Voice.
yeah, that's right. Nick is going to knock it out of the park. Of course, guys, you don't want to miss Nick.
Now, if you don't know,
tomorrow
he was born without arms and legs, and he at 10 years old thought he was worth nothing, and even considered suicide. And then he turned it around and is not only an internationally known speaker and motivator, but he's a businessman. So that's pretty good.
Incredible. I mean, go look him up. Nick Voyages. He's an incredible man. And then after him, my coach, Jeff Van Duzer, the retired dean of Seattle Pacific, the author of Why Business Matters to God. He's going to be sharing as well. And then we're going to have a panel as well of now a new generation of marketplace leaders. They were not there when Oz and Mick and James, when those guys began. They came maybe 10, if not even 20 years later. But they are now shaping a new direction. Shay Bynes, what's his name? Andy Mason, Robert Watkins, and so many others. Dr. Gail Davis, who's doing an area of health and wellness. And so these folks are going to show other expression, how the new gen are doing it. Susan, I look forward to being with you again tomorrow. So Thursday or less, why should they join us tomorrow?
Practical next steps. Yeah. So if you were thinking, oh, called to the marketplace sounds sort of very, fuzzy wuzzy. It's practical. People are doing something specific. And what's what's I think if you're at any point in your career, either considering changing transitions in your career or trying to bring a healthier integrity to the business that you're running or the work environment that you have, this is a practical next steps you can apply.
Well said. Listen, also, if you're watching this and you're enjoying the podcast and you want to sign up, go to nehemiahweek.com. Nehemiahweek.com. You can register right now today. There are free events. There's also paid events. You can join for the rest of the week. We have a special going on only for $99 for not only the rest of the week, but you get all the videos.
All the
Right, you can take
recordings, right?
advantage
Whatever
of
you missed,
all the
you can
recordings.
get. That's
That's
good.
right.
Uh-huh.
And then also, listen, become a part of the community. Join and engage, and let's begin to walk out your marketplace call together. All right. We'll love to see how we can serve you as you do what God has called you to do in the marketplace, in whatever space or area, and whatever season you find yourself. Let me pray for you. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord give you the grace to recognize the gifts and call that He has, that He's given you, and to use them in such a way that one day you will hear those wonderful words, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a few things, and He'll not make room over much. God bless you. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.